courtroom buzzed like a hive on the brink of chaos, its polished oak walls gleaming under the harsh morning light streaming through tall windows. Officer Daniel Pierce, a white cop with a jaw set like steel, sat smugly at the plaintiff's table, his uniform crisp, his smirk sharper. Across the room, Alicia Freeman, a black woman with skin like polished ebony and hair braided tight against her scalp, stared straight ahead. Her eyes, dark and unyielding, held a quiet fire that unnerved the restless crowd. Pierce had just accused her of resisting arrest and assault. Serious charges, delivered with the confidence of a man who'd never been questioned. The judge's gavel cracked the air, silencing the murmurs as all eyes fixed on the scene. Pierce's story painted Alicia as a wild threat, a predator he'd barely tamed. But Alicia sat still, her hands folded, her posture a fortress of calm amidst the storm of his lies. Whispers snaked through the gallery. Who was she? Why didn't she flinch? The air grew thick with anticipation, every breath held as if the truth itself teetered on a knife's edge. Little did they know, Pierce had tangled with a force he couldn't fathom, a woman whose strength ran deeper than the badge he wore. This wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning waiting to ignite. And as the judge called the court to order, one thing was clear. The next words spoken would set the room ablaze. The courtroom simmered as Officer Daniel Pierce took the stand, his boots clicking against the floor like a drumroll of authority. He adjusted his tie, a flicker of arrogance dancing in his blue eyes, and leaned into the microphone. It was a routine patrol, he began, his voice smooth and loud, cutting through the stillness. East side of town, near Magnolia Street. I spotted Alicia Freeman lurking outside a shuttered store. Suspicious, right? I approached, asked her business. She snapped, hostile, loud, uncooperative. The gallery shifted, heads nodding as his words wove a web of guilt around Alicia. He paused for effect, letting the tension coil. I told her to identify herself. She refused, got in my face. When I tried to calm things down, she lunged, hit me square in the chest, grabbed for my gun. Gasps rippled through the room, a woman in the back muttering, "Unbelievable." Pierce's lips twitched, a smirk he couldn't quite hide. I had no choice. I restrained her. She fought like a cornered animal. His tone turned grave, a performer playing to the crowd. I feared for my life. The prosecutor, Richard Hayes, a wiry man with a hawkish glare, nodded approvingly. "And you're certain she posed a threat, Officer Pierce?" he pressed, his voice sharp. "Absolutely," Pierce replied, crossing his arms. "She's dangerous, defiant. I did my job." Across the room, Alicia sat like a statue, her gaze locked on Pierce. Not a flinch, not a tremor. Her lawyer, James Lawson, a young black man with a fire in his eyes, scribbled notes furiously. Judge Margaret Ellison, silver-hagged and stern, peered over her glasses, her face unreadable. The air crackled with belief in Pierce's tale, until Alicia's stillness began to whisper otherwise. Pierce stepped down, his stride cocky, tossing a glance at Alicia as if daring her to crack. She didn't. Her silence roared louder than his words, a shadow creeping over his bravado. The jury leaned forward, sensing a shift. Something didn't fit. Why did she look so unshaken? Pierce settled back at his table, his fingers tapping nervously despite his grin. He'd spun his story, but the room felt tighter now, the walls closing in. The judge's voice cut through, low and firm. "Defense, your witness." James rose, his jaw tight. Alicia's eyes met his, a spark of steel in the storm. Pierce thought he'd won. He had no idea the tide was about to turn. The courtroom held its breath as Alicia Freeman rose from her seat, her navy blazer crisp against the white shirt beneath. Her steps echoed, deliberate and steady, as she approached the witness stand. Every eye followed her, some curious, some skeptical, all hungry for what came next. She settled into the chair, her posture ramrod straight, hands resting lightly on the railing. James Lawson stood, smoothing his tie, his voice cutting through the hush. "Miss Freeman, tell us your side. What happened that night?" Alicia's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Officer Daniel Pierce before returning to James. Her voice rang out, calm but laced with steel. "I was walking home from a friend's place. Stopped on Magnolia Street to check my phone. Directions, nothing more. That's when Officer Pierce rolled up." She paused, letting the weight settle. "He shone his flashlight in my face, demanded to know what I was doing. I told him the truth. He didn't like that. The gallery stirred, a low hum of whispers. James stepped closer. And then? He prompted, his tone urging her on. Alicia's jaw tightened. He asked for my ID. I asked why. He hadn't said I'd broken any law. That's when he got loud, accused me of defying him. I stayed calm, told him I wasn't causing trouble. Her eyes narrowed, but he grabbed my arm anyway. Gasps punctured the silence. Pierce shifted in his seat, his smirk fading into a thin line. The prosecutor, Richard Hayes, leaned forward, ready to pounce. James pressed on. He grabbed you? Without cause? Alicia nodded, her voice steady. Yes. I said, let go. He didn't. He squeezed harder, said, women like you need to shut up and listen. The room erupted shocked murmurs, a man in the back hissing, that's a lie. Judge Margaret Ellison's gavel slammed down. Order! I'll clear this court if I have to. Alicia didn't flinch. Her gaze locked on Pierce, who now avoided her eyes, his fingers drumming the table. James paced before the jury, his voice rising. And what happened next, Miss Freeman? She inhaled sharply. I told him I didn't consent to being touched. He yelled I was resisting, shoved me against his car. My shoulder hit the metal, hard. Then he cuffed me, claimed I went for his gun. Her tone turned icy. That never happened. The jury exchanged glances, brows furrowing. Richard Hayes shot up. Objection, no proof of this wild story. James spun toward him, fire in his eyes. We'll get to proof, counselor. Patience. Judge Ellison waved a hand. Overruled. Continue, Miss Freeman. Alicia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a chilling calm. His body camera? Off. Convenient, right? No record of him twisting my arm, no sound of me begging him to stop. Just his word against mine. Until now. The room froze. Pierce's face paled, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the table's tan. Richard Hayes barked. That's speculation. Judge Ellison cut in, her voice sharp. Enough. Sit down, Mr. Hayes. He obeyed, fuming. James turned to the jury, his tone grave. This isn't about defiance. It's about control. Officer Pierce picked the wrong woman to bully. The gallery buzzed, tension crackling like static. Alicia's lawyer pressed her. Did you threaten him, Ms. Freeman? Her answer came swift, firm. No, I stayed calm. He's the one who lost it. Pierce squirmed, his confidence unraveling. A juror whispered to another, doubt creeping in. Richard Hayes tried again, his voice tight. You expect us to believe a decorated officer made this up? Alicia's eyes met his, unflinching. I expect you to see the truth. It's coming, loud and clear. James stepped back, his voice low but piercing. Your Honor, we have evidence to present soon. It'll change everything. Judge Ellison's brow arched. It better, Mr. Lawson. I don't like surprises. The courtroom pulsed with anticipation, the air thick with unspoken questions. What did Alicia hide? Why did Pierce look like a man staring down a ghost? Alicia stepped down, her gaze slicing through Pierce as she passed. He flinched, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. The judge called a recess, but the tension didn't break. It coiled tighter. James whispered to Alicia, You okay? She nodded, her voice a blade. I've faced worse. He hasn't. Outside, the crowd swelled, sensing a storm brewing. Pierce's lie was a house of cards, and Alicia held the wind. The courtroom doors swung open, and a hush fell like a curtain as Alicia Freeman returned to the stand. The morning light had faded to a gray drizzle outside, casting shadows that danced across her face. She sat tall, her navy blazer a shield, her eyes blazing with purpose. James Lawson stood before her, holding a USB drive like a loaded gun. Miss Freeman, he began, his voice steady. You've told us your side. Now, let's show them. The jury leaned in, breaths held, as Judge Margaret Ellison nodded. Proceed, Mr. Lawson. James handed the drive to the bailiff. The screen flickered to life and the room plunged into silence. Grainy footage rolled. Magnolia Street at dusk. A patrol car's lights flashing. Officer Daniel Pierce's voice boomed through the speakers, sharp and cruel. Don't make this hard, Freeman. The camera shook as a bystander filmed from a car window. Alicia stood calm, hands at her sides. "I'm not resisting," she said, her tone even. "Let go of my arm." Then, a blur. Pierce yanked her, slamming her against the car. "Women like you don't get to question me," he snarled. The crowd gasped, a woman in the gallery clutching her chest. The footage cut off, but the echo lingered, Pierce's face drained of color, his hands trembling on the table. James turned to the jury, his voice rising. "That's the truth, Officer Pierce. Buried. No lunge, no gun grab, just a man abusing his power." The room erupted, shouts, murmurs, a juror slamming a fist on the rail. Judge Ellison's gavel crashed. "Order! Sit down, all of you!" Richard Hayes leapt up, his voice shrill. "Your Honor, this is ambush evidence. It's incomplete." James spun on him, fire in his eyes. "Incomplete? It's enough to show your client's a liar." The judge's glare silenced them both. "Enough. Mr. Lawson, anything else?" James nodded, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Yes, Your Honor. Officer Pierce's record." He held up pages, yellowed complaints, redacted reports. 10 years on the force, 6 allegations of excessive force, 3 for racial bias, all swept under the rug. He tossed the file to the jury table, papers scattering like confetti. "This isn't one mistake, it's a pattern." Pierce shot to his feet, his voice cracking. "That's slander. Those were dismissed." James faced him, unflinching. "Dismissed by who? Your buddies at the precinct?" The gallery buzzed, a man yelling, "Shame on you!" Judge Ellison banged her gavel again. "One more outburst and I'll empty this room." Alicia's voice cut through the chaos, clear and commanding. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge paused, then nodded. "Go ahead, Miss Freeman." She stood, her presence filling the space like a storm rolling in. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Alicia Freeman, retired Navy SEAL." The courtroom froze, jaws dropping. 20 years I served combat zones, covert ops. I've led teams through hell and back, disciplines in my bones. A juror gasped audibly. Pierce's eyes widened, sweat beading on his brow. Alicia stepped forward, her gaze locking on him. "That night, I wasn't a threat. I was a citizen asking a question. You didn't see me. You saw a chance to flex your badge." Her voice hardened. "You underestimated me, Officer Pierce." Big mistake. James seized the moment, turning to the jury. A Navy SEAL, trained to stay cool under fire. Does that sound like someone who'd lose it over a flashlight? Or does it sound like someone a bully couldn't handle? He pointed at Pierce. He lied to save his ego. That video, those records, they prove it. Richard Hayes tried to counter, his tone desperate. "This is theater. She's playing the hero card." Alicia's eyes flashed. "I don't play, counselor. I live it." The jury scribbled notes, faces hardening. Pierce's fellow officers in the back row shifted, one whispering, "He's done." James held up a final document, Pierce's body camera log. One more thing, his camera didn't malfunction. He turned it off 5 minutes before he approached Alicia. The room exploded again, louder now, defiance in the air. A woman stood, shouting, "Justice!" Judge Ellison's gavel fell like thunder. "Order! I won't warn you again." Pierce slumped in his chair, his bravado shattered. His hands shook as he stared at the floor, the weight of his lies crashing down. Alicia stood firm, her voice steady as she faced the judge. "I didn't fight for my country to be silenced here. The truth's out now. Let it speak." James stepped back, his voice low but fierce. "Your Honor, the defense rests." The jury's eyes burned with resolve, some glaring at Pierce, others nodding at Alicia. The gallery hummed, electric with outrage and awe. Judge Ellison leaned forward, her tone grave. "We'll recess. Mr. Pierce, I suggest you brace yourself." As Alicia stepped down, Pierce avoided her gaze, his shoulders caving. The courtroom emptied in a frenzy, reporters scrambling, voices overlapping. Outside, rain streaked the windows, but inside, a fire had ignited. Pierce's wall wasn't just cracked, it was rubble. And Alicia? She was the storm that brought it down. The courtroom pulsed with a raw, restless energy as the recess ended. Rain tapped the windows like impatient fingers, mirroring the tension inside. Officer Daniel Pierce sat hunched, his uniform wrinkled. his once proud smirk replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. Across the room, Alicia Freeman stood beside James Lawson, her navy blazer sharp, her gaze unbreakable. The jury filed in, faces etched with purpose. Judge Margaret Ellison settled into her chair, her voice slicing the air. Closing arguments. Mr. Hayes, you're up. Richard Hayes rose, his suit creased from pacing, his tone strained. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, hands clasped tight. This case isn't simple. Officer Pierce made a call. Split second, high stakes, law enforcement's tough. He saw a threat, acted to protect us. He glanced at Pierce, who stared at the table. Yes, mistakes happened. The video's ugly, but intent matters. He didn't mean harm, just order. His voice faltered. Don't let emotion cloud the facts. Alicia Freeman resisted. That's the core. Thank you. He sat, avoiding the jury's eyes. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Doubt, not conviction. James Lawson stood, buttoning his jacket, his presence steady as stone. He faced the jury, his voice warm but firm. Emotion? This isn't about tears. It's about truth. He pointed at Pierce. Officer Pierce didn't see a threat. He saw a black woman who dared ask why, and he couldn't stand it. The jury leaned forward, rapt. James paced, his words sharp. You saw the video, her calm, his rage. You heard her. A Navy SEAL, 20 years of honor. Then, there's him. Complaints buried, camera off, lies piled high. He stopped, voice dropping. This isn't one bad night. It's a system letting power run wild. Alicia didn't resist. She stood her ground. He turned to her, eyes fierce. That's strength, not crime. A juror nodded. Another wiped a tear. James faced them again, his tone rising. You've got power now. Hold him accountable. Show justice isn't a whisper, it's a roar. Free Alicia. End this lie. He sat, the room silent but alive, the air thick with his words. Judge Ellison instructed the jury, her voice steady. Deliberate, carefully. Facts, not feelings. They left, and time crawled. Alicia sat in the hallway, hands clasped, staring at the rain. James paced nearby. Think they'll get it? He asked, voice low. She met his gaze, calm as ever. They'll feel it, James. Truth cuts deep. Hours later, the bailiff's call echoed. Verdicts in. The courtroom filled fast, a restless sea of faces. Pierce's shoulders sagged, his fellow officers absent now. Alicia stood tall, James beside her. The forewoman, a woman with gray curls and fierce eyes, rose. Judge Ellison nodded. Your verdict. The forewoman's voice rang clear. In State versus Alicia Freeman, we find the defendant not guilty on all charges. Cheers broke out, sharp, defiant. The gavel cracked. Order, the forewoman continued, unflinched. We also urge a full investigation into Officer Daniel Pierce's conduct. Pierce's head dropped, hands shaking. The gallery roared again, applause, not chaos. Judge Ellison's tone turned cold. Noted. Officer Pierce, get a lawyer. This isn't done. Alicia exhaled, a weight lifting. James gripped her shoulder, grinning. We did it. She nodded, voice soft but steel. No, James, they did. The jury filed out, some meeting her eyes with respect, others glaring at Pierce. The room emptied, slow, voices buzzing with victory and shock. Outside, rain slowed to a drizzle, the sky clearing. Alicia stepped into it, head high. Pierce's lie was ash. Her truth stood tall. The fight wasn't over, but today, justice sang. The courthouse steps gleamed wet under a breaking sky, the drizzle fading as sunlight pierced the clouds. Alicia Freeman stood tall, her navy blazer catching the glow, her braids swaying in the breeze. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but she faced them with the same calm she'd held in court. This isn't just my win, she said, her voice steady, rich with resolve. It's for everyone silenced by power. Accountability starts here. The crowd erupted. Cheers, claps, a child waving a handmade sign. Truth wins. James Lawson stood beside her, pride in his eyes, as she turned and walked away, leaving the chaos behind. Weeks later, Officer Daniel Pierce's world crumbled. The investigation sparked by the jury's call uncovered a trail of buried complaints, bruised citizens, hushed voices, all ignored by a complicit system. His badge was stripped, his name splashed across headlines, charges loomed, perjury, misconduct, and his former allies scattered, their silence deafening. The precinct's back row, once a wall of support, stayed empty now. Pierce faded into disgrace, a shadow of the man who'd smirked at Alicia that first day. Alicia returned to her quiet home on the town's edge, oak trees whispering around her porch, but her story didn't fade. Invitations poured in, schools, rallies, newsrooms, all begging to hear the Navy SEAL who'd toppled a lie. She spoke when it mattered, her words igniting sparks of defiance in others. "I fought overseas," she told one crowd, her voice fierce yet warm. "Now I fight here. Justice isn't a gift, it's a battle." Applause followed her, a ripple turning to a wave. Inside, she kept her folded flag on the mantel, a reminder of battles past. James visited often, their bond forged in fire. "You're a symbol now," he said once, sipping coffee on her couch. She smiled faintly. "Not a symbol, James, a voice." And she meant it. Her fight stretched beyond Magnolia Street, beyond Pierce, to every corner where truth lay buried. A narrator's voice broke in, soulful and deep. Alicia Freeman didn't just win a case, she lit a fire. Her story's a call. Stand up, speak out. If this moved you, hit subscribe. Join us for more tales of grit and glory. The fight's not over, and neither are we. The screen faded, Alicia's silhouette against the sunset, a warrior at rest but ever ready. Truth had prevailed, and through her it would keep burning bright.